Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'll be giving you guys the full rundown of Season 1 of The War Within, including changes to how the season is actually going to be rolling out, massive adjustments to Mythic Plus scaling and affixes, a new form of endgame content in Delves, and much more. All of this information is going to be according to what we currently know from blue posts, as well as beta testing, so be aware it is all subject to change before launch, and there are certain things that we don't know at all. We're just kind of making assumptions, but I'll try and make a point to emphasize what we do and do not know going into the expansion. Also remember, I will have a ton of guide content covering dungeons, covering raids, and covering tank specs as well for Season 1, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel to be notified when that stuff gets posted. Otherwise, let's get started here, and as you can see, I have just a ton of tabs open. I've read all of these things, so you don't have to, and I will give you just the quick spark notes here on all these things. So first off, we have the schedule here. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there is an early access period to this expansion starting on, this is an EU time, so 22nd for North America, and this just kind of shows what is available at each date here. Really, really great. A graphic here. I'm actually not sure who made this. That is the one issue. I don't know who made this. It was linked in my guild Discord. Really, really great resource though. Maybe someone in the comments can let me know who made this so I can shout them out and link them in the description. But I actually have no idea who made this. But yeah, so basically the first early access period for the 4 or so days, you've got, the campaign. You can level up to max. There's the new allied race. You have low tier delves, which we'll get into that later on. You have the normal dungeons, no heroic dungeons are available, then the new battlegrounds. When launch actually happens, that's when the heroic dungeons are available. That's on the following Monday. And then when the reset rolls around, so the Tuesday or Wednesday if you're EU, that's when the weekly quests are available. That's when world quests are available and profession weeklies are available. Notably though, world quests and profession weeklies, we're not 100% sure. There's an asterisk here because that is assumed based on how they rolled out in Dragonflight. Not 100% sure if that's going to be the same way in The War Within, but that is currently the assumption. Now, once the expansion actually comes out, there's going to be actually a support a streamer Twitch drop event type thing where if you watch 4 hours of a Twitch stream of someone streaming WoW, you can get the TCG mount, the Ghastly Charger. And if you gift 2 subs to a Twitch streamer, you can get the Watcher of the Huntress pet. And again, that's any WoW Twitch streamer, including myself. So if you want to get those, stop by the channel. I will be streaming all throughout early access, all throughout the first couple weeks of this without the season and the season itself. So make sure you stop by Tactics over on Twitch, linked in the description below. Show some love. From there though, you are gonna have 2 weeks, like I mentioned at the beginning of the expansion, to actually fully level up before the start of Season 1. You've got heroic dungeons, like I mentioned, no mythic zeros. Again, we'll talk about that later, how that adjustments have worked in the dungeon system. And then September 10th or September 11th, depending on your region, is when the season actually does start. And Blizzard has opted to bring back Heroic Week. So Mythic Plus Dungeons and Mythic Raid are not available week 1 of the season. They're available here in week 2. Everything else is going to be available in week 1. So that's the Mythic Zero Dungeons, World Boss, Normal, and Heroic. Even the first wing of LFR, which looks like it's sped up a bit here with LFR wing 1, 2, and 3 just back-to-back weeks. Something to note again, the dungeon squish, we'll talk about this in later on. This is probably a little worse than, Dragonflight as an example, but probably a little better than potentially previous seasons because of how they've changed scaling and rewards in Mythic Zero. So worse than Dragonflight, but better than some of the earlier existing heroic weeks that we've had previously in WoW's history. That is the schedule. Now, I did want to quickly just touch on a couple of the actual systems and big things that are being brought in by The War Within. One is the Warband system, which of course players have been getting familiar with in pre-patch, and the other is the hero talents, which are currently locked, but are one of the key defining features of The War Within, and you're going to be getting this as you level. Basically what's going on here is every spec in the game is going to have 2 of these. So this is an example using Guardian Druid. They have Elune's Chosen and Druid of the Claw, and then these are also shared with one of the other specs of the same class. So for example, Elune's Chosen is available to Guardian Druids and Balance Druids. Druid of the Claw is available to Guardian Druids and Feral Druids, that kind of thing. Basically these just add a bit of flavor and synergy to the base kit. So as an example, Elune's Chosen here has big synergy with Lunar Beam and then also amplifies your arcane spells, whereas Druid of the Claw here, it amplifies your Maul and has more synergy with your physical spells and your bleeds, that kind of thing. So the idea here, they each offer some distinct kind of theme that hopefully resonates with you. You basically just get these points as you level. You are going to be getting every single point here, so you don't need to worry about making a wrong selection at any point. Once you're max level, you have all these points, so your decisions come in the form of these choice nodes. Basically, these are the ones you can switch, and just like talents, these can be switched anywhere at any time, so you don't need to worry about picking the wrong thing or whatever, right? You're obviously you're going to be locked in if you start like a Mythic Plus dungeon or if you enter raid combat, but other than that, you can change these exactly like regular talents, so you don't need to worry about making a bad decision somewhere. You're going to get all of them, and you just have to switch between choice nodes whenever you want to. Not going to go through every single hero tree available because, like I said, there's 2 for every spec, with some shared between specs, but there's a lot. Would definitely recommend checking them out. Sorry. Warbands is the other one, and this is kind of Blizzard's answer to the player feedback of wanting a lot of the game to be more count-wide. You have these cool screens where you can show 4 characters, but notably, all these characters down here, they're also part of your warband. It's not just these 4. Every single character is part of your warband, and you know, here's kind of like the main goals here, right? A lot of items, a lot of currencies. They're now, instead of being bound to an individual character, you can send them across your entire warband. You can unlock transmog from, like, if you're wearing, if you're a cloth character, you can unlock plate transmog, that kind of thing. So very, very big quality of life changes all rolled into this one system, which is awesome. There's a warband bank all shared between your characters that you can put all your crafting materials in and just craft at any time, which is super, super, super useful. There's a couple nice additions also when the expansion launches related to rep. So like Renown is shared across your entire warband in the War Within. And there's also new warband until equipped items that you can get as drops from like raid, Mythic Plus, that kind of thing. They are slightly lower than regular drops from the difficulty you're doing, but they drop on top of the regular loot, not in place of it, and they can be sent to anyone in your warband, making it a little bit easier to gear up some of your alt characters off the bat. Now that brings us to delves. So this is basically a big, massive write-up on everything we know about delves and War Within on Wowhead. Useful if you guys want to read it, but it is very long, so I will give you a synopsis. Basically, delves are the new form of endgame content Blizzard is making. They are aimed at being bite-sized, so significantly shorter than Mythic Plus even, and more flexible with any group of players between 1 and 5. Less difficult also than like pushing high Mythic Plus or pushing like Mythic rating as an example, and more for people, you know, if you have issues with committing large chunks of time, if you have issues with, you know, we only have like 2 or 3 friends that ever play at a time, delves are your answer. As I mentioned, any group size between 1 and 5, and the goal Blizzard stated is, I believe, 10 to 15 minutes long. Yeah, no timer in there as well, so you can kind of, you know, you need to take a break, you can stop, you can take a break in the middle of a delve even, you know, do whatever you need to do and then come back and you're still good in the middle of that delve. They're also going to be part of the Great Vault now. The PvP row is gone. It's replaced with delves along with raids and Mythic Plus, and this caps out on hero track gear. So again, not quite as high as the highest Mythic Plus, as the highest raid, and it's also a little bit easier than those things, but still pretty respectable eye level you're going to be able to get. In terms of getting the gear from the delves themselves, there is a bit of RNG involved, of course, you know, chest at the end, random drops, but basically the best gear outside of the Great Vault, of course, that's going to be the best, but the best gear you can get from the delves themselves is going to be gated behind bountiful delves. I think there's a picture here. Yeah, this is from the WoW thing. Basically, when you look at a delve on the map, I know it's blurry, sorry, you can see it says bountiful delve, and it says how long it's a bountiful delve for. These just contain an extra locked chest at the end of the delve, assuming you complete it, which can be unlocked with these restored coffer keys. However, these coffer keys, you can only get a limited number of them on a weekly basis, and that is from the kind of weekly objective caches. Think about, you know, doing like the feast, or, you know, doing the super bloom, those kind of things. Those kind of objective caches will reward you a limited number of these restored coffer keys on a weekly basis. And then outside of that, you can earn fragments from doing things like world quests, like killing rares, opening treasures, and then once you get 100 of those fragments, you can combine it into an additional key to get this loot. Delves do still drop lower item level gear outside from the unlocked chests, not just the locked chests. However, of course, like I said, the best drop item level gear is from specifically those bountiful delves in the locked chests, so keep that in mind. For season 1, there's going to be 12 main delves out in the world, and each of them also has several different variants to shake up gameplay slightly. So you'll go into the same delve, but sometimes there'll be different enemies to fight or even different objectives entirely to complete. On top of this, players are also going to have a companion for the season, which in this case is Bran Bronzebeard, who you can level up by doing delves, making him more powerful, and also equip him with different pieces of gear that you find in delves to grant him special abilities. Each delve goes up to the max level of 11, though it is important to note that gear rewards actually stop at level 8. So if all you care about is maximizing your gear, whether that's from the drops and the bountiful chests or from the Great Vault, all you need to complete is level 8. Level 11s are just for things like achievements and some cosmetic rewards. Speaking of, we have the main cosmetic reward here, these really heavily customizable like Zeppelin airship type mounts. You can see it works a bit like the dragon riding mounts from Dragonflight, where you could have all these different options and these different parts that you can get. And you can see here basically like all these different colorations and how the parts look, all that kind of stuff. There's a ton here you can acquire through a variety of delve activities, not just past level 8, by the way, just all through the delves, doing the achievements, doing different levels, just random drops. You can get tons and tons of these different parts, so something a lot of people will probably be excited to kind of collect the parts of and work towards finishing entirely. There's also a 13th delve that you can unlock the hard mode of after you complete all 12 of the other delves on level 11, so the max level, and that is aimed to apparently be similar to the Mage Tower, which is something that a lot of people are excited about. It's just a single boss encounter basically in a room that is apparently going to rotate seasonally. Every season is going to be a new single boss, which would be really, really cool. And if you're successful on taking them down solo, you get a unique kind of like void skin for this mount, which is really, really cool to see. Hopefully, I personally love difficult solo challenges, so I would love for that to be, you know, hard. And of course, if it is hard, I will definitely be putting out a guide to help you guys get it down. Now let's move on and talk dungeons, where affixes have gotten a bit of a makeover, plus keystone levels themselves have been squished. Now let's focus on that first. This is actually a change that happened in season 4, but you know, a lot of people skipped that season. So here is the quick scaling rundown. Basically, heroic dungeons here, they are now tuned equivalent to old Mythic Zeros. Mythic Zeros are now equivalent to old +10 dungeons, and +10 dungeons are now equivalent to old +20 dungeons. Rewards have also shifted accordingly in terms of item level, as well as like crest drops, that kind of thing. KSM as well, that's more like +4, +5 keys now. Your portals are at +10 instead of +20, that kind of thing. So they've shifted everything down basically and squished the levels, so there's less total levels you need to work through in the entire system. Mythic Zero dungeons are actually also down here. Look, they are a daily lockout now instead of weekly, and like I said, they're rewarding gear, I think slightly worse than a +10, an old +10, especially now. I think they slightly nerfed the rewards of Mythic Zero dungeons, but you will be able to do all of them daily once the season starts in week 1, and that's kind of their reasoning behind blocking Mythic Plus. Again, it's not perfect, it's definitely not better than what happened in Dragonflight, it's definitely worse in terms of gearing, but it's what they've opted to do with season 1. And also, since we did mention KSM, here is the new KSM mount. It's actually a flying mount, a dragonfly, or not a dragonfly, what's it called? Dynamic flying now? Dynamic flying mount is a diamond mech suit. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Very happy to not have another lizard. That is very, very good. Yeah, that is how the keystone squish works. Now let's talk about affixes, because that is a separate and an also massive change. Big changes coming here. Basically, every weekly affix, as you know it, has been removed. Sanguine, it's gone. Bolstering, Raging, Bursting, these are, never mind, ignore those. Those are from ones they tested and they got rid of them. So basically, all these old affixes that people really weren't a fan of, they're gone entirely. They are gone. In their place, there are basically 6 new affixes, some of them rotating, some of them permanent. So let's walk through those, and that begins on level 2. So this is actually here. This is a good graph here that kind of shows you where these affixes add in. At level 2, there is Xal'atath's Bargain. There are 4 of these affixes, and they rotate weekly. So there's going to be 4 weeks of the rotation here, each one being one of the Xal'atath's Bargains. In terms of what these 4 affixes are, so the first is Ascendant. This basically spawns 10 orbs. You use a CC or an interrupt on the cast these orbs are doing, and it gives your entire group a stacking 2% haste and speed buff for 20 seconds, so that's 20% haste and speed. Yes, you heard right. That is a Kiss Curse affix I just described. All 4 of these, in fact, are Kiss Curse affixes, so very, very cool to see them putting in rotating Kiss Curse affixes here. And like I mentioned, you want to see these orbs or interrupt them. They work a lot like Razagath orbs, if you remember those. And if you fail to do that, though, they will instead put that haste and speed buff on the mobs you're fighting. So you want to make sure you are doing that, otherwise bad things happen. The next is Voidbound. That instead spawns just a single mob, and this guy has more HP, and they follow around your tank. Every 2 seconds, they stack up a DR on all nearby enemies, but when you do kill the mob, it gives your whole group CDR and healing increase for 20 seconds. So again, Kiss Curse. This one, instead of giving the group damage, though, it gives them a bit of CDR and healing, which can be nice. Next, we've got Oblivion. That spawns 10 of these crystals really far away from the pack, and then slowly hone in on a mob and move in towards them. Players can soak these and get in their way and get a stacking, mastery, and leech buff again to the whole group. One player soaks it and applies the buff to the whole group. So it's not like one player can hog all these, or it's going to be like an optimal, hey, make sure this player soaks them. No, one player soaks it, everyone gets it. Really nice. And if you fail to soak this, it puts a 10% DR on the mob it touches. The last one is Devour. This debuffs all players, and it can be removed with any type of dispel, including AoE dispels like Mass Dispel or Poison Cleansing Totem, or if the player is healed for 50% of their max health. When the debuff is removed, it grants, again, your entire party some crit and some max health, and if you fail to remove it, then it actually just heals all the mobs you are in combat with, I think for about 10% of their HP. So there's a decent mix of both the stat bonuses being provided as well as the utility that they're emphasizing you use to handle each of those affixes, which is nice. Moving on, though, as you can see here, Fortified or Tyrannical will apply at a level 4. Then you move on and you got level 7 where you have Challenger's Peril. This one is a new affix. It doesn't rotate. It's always on level 7, and it just increases the death timer penalty from 5 seconds to 15 seconds. Not a big fan of this one personally, but that's what it is. Then on level 10, you get the second of Tyrannical or Fortified. So basically the 4 is rotating each week between Fortified and Tyrannical, and this is the 10 is rotating the opposite. So this is Fortified, this is Tyrannical. If this is Tyrannical, this is Fortified, meaning every key 10 or higher, if you want to get your portals, or if you want to push for the 0.1% title or whatever above, anything above a level 10 or at a level 10 is going to have both Fortified and Tyrannical, so that is something to keep in mind. Finally, once you get to level 12, this is where Blizzard has kind of deemed this is where the pushing starts for people going for higher and higher keys. And what they've done here is they've actually removed the level 2 affix. So that one disappears at level 12, and it's replaced with a new affix called Xal'atath's Guile, which is just a flat 20% increase to the health and damage scaling of the entire dungeon. And the goal here is to kind of remove the idea of push weeks and just allowing players who want to push keys and do high keys do it whenever they really want to, and an equal playing field from week to week. There's no push weeks, there's nothing like that. You just, if you want to push keys this week, go ahead. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Maybe you don't have to wait for the right bargain to pop up or anything like that. Any week you want to, that gets replaced and you can do high keys. Now, in terms of how this affects score, there's only going to be one score per dungeon now, because you're having Fortified and Tyrannical on every single key every single week, is my understanding. So it's just based off one key now. Your best single key per dungeon is my understanding. And I think they have also increased the total number of points one dungeon gives to compensate for that. So it should be relatively similar to how it's been in the past in terms of the level of keys you need to do to get those various achievements. There's definitely some huge changes to affixes here. I'm excited to see what everyone thinks of these changes, and I'm also excited to see how this kind of evolves in future seasons, because Blizzard themselves have stated this was kind of a very last minute change that they did to the system. Now, speaking of the season, of course, there is going to be some seasonal dungeons. Here is the full list for you here. So this is 4 War Within dungeons and 4 returning dungeons. So I guess one of the big changes is those Mythic Zero dungeons and Queuable Heroic dungeons you're going to be doing during a season are actually also this pool, instead of just being the War Within dungeon. So a bit of consistency there between the difficulty. So for the War Within dungeons, you've got Stone Vault, Dawnbreaker, Arakara, and City of Threads. And then for the Brought Back dungeons, you've got Grim Batol from Cataclysm, which has received a ton of changes. You've got 2 Shadowlands dungeons in the Necrotic Wake and Mists of Tirna Scythe. And then you've got the returning BFA dungeon, Siege of Borealis, which I know a lot of people were not happy to see that one again, but there it is. And as usual, I will have guide videos for all of these dungeons available very, very shortly, plus my Mythic Plus ability tracking sheet is actually available. You can drag that here. Let me show you this one. This has seen a lot of improvements to, of course, tracking all the abilities, what they do, interrupts, everything like that. We've also added boss abilities for people that haven't seen it before. This is new for this expansion, and also images of roots as well as the MDT string or whatever for you to import it for yourself. Those are pug-friendly roots as well. So a big upgrade to the sheet here, and this will be linked down in the description for you guys, available absolutely free, of course. Now, then we have the raid. Here we go. This is the raid stuff. We're moving on, of course. The brand new raid is Nerub-ar Palace, which will feature 8 bosses, along with new tier sets for all the specs, and 2 new mounts to get, both from the last boss. This is the last boss on any difficulty here, this guy right there. And then you've got a similar mount with a different color, here as the mythic mount, which I believe now you get 3 mythic mounts per kill instead of just 2, so a little bit easier for those CE guilds to fill out the mounts on their roster, which is nice. The tier bonuses of this season are kind of following suit to what Dragonflight did in the first season in terms of simplicity. In Dragonflight, they wanted you to play with the new talents. In War Within, they want you to not have your choice of hero tree be impacted by your tier. So they're very general, usually low impact, and also just quite simple across the board. Also, as I mentioned earlier in the video, Heroic Week is making a return, as is very rare loot, which includes the recent change that ups its drop chance, but also makes it drop on top of the regular boss suit instead of replacing one of those pieces, making them a bit less very rare. Also, when Mythic does open up 1 week later, it will be immediately cross-realm to pair with the release of cross-realm guilds, of course, in the War Within. For players that are a bit intimidated by the whole kind of raid scene, but still want to actually experience the story, see here, there's this brand new story difficulty available starting on the release of Mythic Week, which allows players to solo go in and experience the Queen Ansarek final boss fight on their own, and the finale of the first chapter of the expansion's story. No loot bonus here, just something that players can go into and see by themselves, which I think is really cool to see. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about raid tuning, because this is something that people had quite a few issues with in Amir Drasil, as players hit max eye level relatively quickly in the season, and then they kind of just had to wait for bosses that they were stuck on progressing to get nerfs before they could actually progress further, because there wasn't that slow nerfing by gaining more gear. To help with this, Blizzard is doing a couple things. One, they are bringing back a kind of old idea. I think they referenced Aldir and maybe some earlier raids, where about a month into the season here, you're going to be able to start collecting this Nerub-ar finery, and every other week you'll be able to turn this in and gain a stacking 2.25, specific number, 2.25% damage and healing increase, which maxes out at a total of 18%. So the goal here is to slowly empower players, as opposed to having to put in these boss nerfs to help them get these bosses down even after they've already hit their max gear, and hopefully make them less reliant on nerfing bosses just kind of across the board. Some notable things: this is for your entire warband, not just the character you do the quest on, so warband wide for that. And also there's already going to be catch-up built in, so if you come into the patch later on, you aren't insanely far behind everyone. You will catch up on these relatively quickly. Now, I did mention they did a couple things here, so let's move on then and talk about the upgrade system. There's this neat little graphic here posted on the competitive WoW subreddit, and this is from Andra on the competitive WoW subreddit. I will link this in the description if you guys want it. And basically this shows the eye levels of gear you'll be able to get in each section. So there's the early access, the first couple of weeks, the first week of the season, and then second week onwards. I guess a couple things to note: this does have Great Vault stuff. These Great Vault is not available until the season starts, so you can ignore these Great Vault things. This just kind of does show, you know, where dungeons are at, where crafting gear is at, because a lot of those systems are moving forward from Dragonflight into the War Within. So crests, for example, this is also still a thing in the War Within. They've renamed all the crests, though, to fit the theme of the expansion. So Whelpling crests are now weathered crests. Drake crests are carved. Worms are runed and aspects are gilded. So gonna have to get used to some new names here. In terms of acquisitions, there are also some slight adjustments to where you're going to be acquiring these different crests. So gilded, those are the aspect equivalents, those now drop on +9 keys instead of +8. And myth track gear from the Great Vault for dungeons is now only available on +10 keys and up. So it's gonna be a little harder to get both those things from Mythic Plus. For some easier acquisition, the last two bosses of the raid, which I believe maybe here, yeah, the last two bosses actually drop 15 of the worm equivalent and 15 of the aspect equivalent if you're doing a heroic one, for example. So they drop 15 of the current difficulty and 15 of the difficulty above. So a little bit easier to get some more crests from raid specifically. Finally, like I was talking about, to give players some more power over the course of the actual patch and increase the time it takes to fully gear out a character, Blizzard has added 2 steps to the myth track. You can see down here at the bottom, myth track now goes to 6 steps. Currently it goes to 4 on Dragonflight, but they're extending it 2 more slots at the end to basically mean you can upgrade any gear to the equivalent of end boss very rare gear. So this is a net increase to player power while also increasing the amount of time it takes you to actually hit maxed out gear, but it also does mean you need a lot more of those gilded crests to actually hit that cap. So we'll see how that actually feels on alt characters. Now, of course, you can see here, this is the crafted difficulty, or crafted eye level, sorry. So because of these changes to the myth track, they have also increased the eye level of the highest crafted items available. So now they're 5 out of 6 on the actual myth track instead of being, I think there were 3 out of 4 previously. So they've given them a little bit of a boost there to have them remain competitive. Of course, professions are still going to be relevant in the new expansion because you do still have those 2 embellishment slots that you're going to want to wear. But of course, there's a plethora of new embellishments to choose from. And of course, with the expansion, you are starting out at 0 with these new professions, right? Your profession knowledge and whatever from Dragonflight do not carry over. So you are starting from fresh, so you do not need to feel behind if you didn't play in Dragonflight. There's also a pretty significant change to how crafting works because inspiration is actually gone as a stat. Now it's replaced with concentration, which is basically a way to deterministically allow players to select which gear they want to actually empower and craft at rank 5, essentially, instead of relying on that random inspiration proc. However, this concentration thing is a limited pool that you will not at the start at least get a ton back of every time you use it. So once you work your way through that pool, you're not going to be able to craft more rank 5s or like a recraft rank 5 stats, for example. Especially early on in the expansion, this is probably going to, make these rank 5 things relatively scarce. And with the changes, it seems like one player is not going to be able to just craft for an entire server. So it could be a good idea if you want to get a rank 5 early to probably level your own profession that you're going to be crafting with. Finally, though, let's talk about the Catalyst. The Catalyst is making a return. This is to help with tier acquisition. For those that don't know, this is basically just something that you can put a non-tier item that is of the same slot as a tier piece in, and you can use a charge from this and it transforms that into a tier piece itself with the same stats and everything like that. Similarly, any non-tier pieces can be put into this and it transforms it into the transmog version of the tier set and have specific stats that they will give you, so you can potentially re-roll into better secondary stats deterministically. Here, in terms of how the charges work, we don't have 100% confirmation on how this is going to work. I am just going to assume that it functions the same as Dragonflight Season 3 because we have not heard differently. And so what that means is that you'll start the season with a charge and you will gain a new charge every other week. The only question here is how Heroic Week actually impacts that. Are you going to get your first charge on Heroic Week, or are they going to give you the first charge on Mythic Week? Either way, though, once you get that first charge, my guess is that it'll be rotating. Every 2 weeks you'll get an additional charge to allow you to get that tier sets and put together your 4-piece relatively quickly. And this, of course, is kind of combined with some of the other things that exist, like the KSM or ahead of the curve Omni token. Basically, whichever one of those you complete first, only one time per character, you will get a free Omni token from doing that. And also the final boss, Queen Ansarek, does drop Omni tokens on top of her regular loot pool. There we have it, guys. That was hopefully a quick-ish synopsis of everything we know so far about the first few weeks of the expansion, how systems are going to work, what's new, what you have to look forward to. Hopefully you found this video useful. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. As always, I need to shout out my amazing Patreon supporters for all of the help and allowing me to continue to make content like this. And a reminder, we've got Mythic Plus guides coming, we've got raid guides coming, and we've got tank guides coming, plus a ton of other content. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.